4s. Today we're going to continue reading Front Desk. Today we're actually going to read 4 chapters, and numbers 58 through 61. I've been loving reading your responses on Seesaw. So many good questions and thoughts and feelings about what's been happening in the book. I want to jump right into it. As usual, I have permission from both Kelly Yang and Scholastic, so thank you so much for giving us permission to post these here on YouTube. Let's get started because yesterday, chapter 57, it ended with Hank reading the letter, and it says, Hank's smile vanished. He put the letter down, and I knew. And some of you were unsure. Some of you had an idea of what that meant, and some of you were like, Miss Fisher, I need to know what happened. Did she win? And I want you to think about it before I read this. Do you think, based on that reaction, if she won or not? Chapter 58. We sat in silence, the hot tears pooling in my eyes. Billy Bob's hands balling into fists, and Mrs. Q shaking her head, blinking hard, and blowing her nose into a tissue like someone had died. Because in a way, that's what it felt like. Our dream had died. This is bull, Hank yelled. He looked madder than I'd ever seen him before, madder even then when he threw that drunk guy out. It's okay, I said softly. No, it's not okay, he bellowed. He got up and walked across the room. How could they do this? Maybe what I wrote just wasn't... The lump in my throat became a boulder. Maybe it just wasn't good. They slithered in like eels. You're a bike. The other kids are cars. You'll never be as good as the white kids in their language. I tried to stop it, but it was no use. Doubt came in through every pore. Hank shook his head. You know what? I'll bet the whole thing's a scam. They're probably not even giving away a motel. They just wanted the money. Probably thought $300 is nothing to people. They didn't know you sold your lucky pennies. My dad's face plunged. You sold the lucky pennies? He asked. He looked away immediately, but there was a second in which I saw into him crystal clear. I saw all of his hope fade away. We'll help you find new ones, Hank said, looking around at the other weeklies. We'll all look, won't we? The weeklies instantly started digging into their pockets for loose change. No, it's fine, my dad said. I'm fine. Later that night, the weeklies went back to their rooms, and I sat with emptiness that was almost unbearable. I went out the back to look for my dad. I found him sitting by himself in the laundry room. Hey, Dad, I said. He looked up at me, his eyes pink and moist like he'd been crying. Hey, sweetheart, he said. He quickly dabbed his eyes with the towels. I'm sorry I sold our lucky pennies, I said to him. I told myself that I wasn't going to cry, but the tears came anyway. My father pulled me into his arms. Hey, no, it's okay. You win some and you lose some, he said, kissing the top of my head. Yeah, but I always lose some. My dad looked down at me and wiped a tear away too. That's not true, he said. Because of you, Uncle Zhang's now free. Hank has a new job. I'd call that a win. But I really wanted to win for us this time, I muttered. My dad rocked me in his arms. I know you did, sweetheart, he said, his voice shaking. I know you did. Chapter 59. So that's it. I'm not going, I told Lupe at school the next day. I can't believe this. Did they say who won? I shook my head. I bet it was their cousin or their son or something stupid like that, she said. It couldn't have been your essay. I read your essay. It was so good. It felt good to hear her say that, although a part of me still wasn't sure. We were sitting on the grass in PE, way out in left field, avoiding the ball at any chance of injury, as usual. Lupe picked a blade of grass and twirled it around her finger. You know, I'm kind of glad you're not going, she said. Yeah, so you don't have to stay with Jason all by yourself, I asked, squinting at her in the sun. Well, so I don't have to stay on the roller coaster all by myself, she whispered. It occurred to me at that moment what it would have been like for Lupe if I had left. I always thought I was the one who needed her, that I was the barnacle to her whale. But it wasn't one way. We needed each other, me and Lupe. She'd been trying to tell me this all along. but it never really hit me until now. Well, you don't have to worry, I said. I'm not going anywhere. Lupe smiled at me. I'll be on the roller coaster for a long, long time, I said. Lupe shook her head. Nope, you're not. You're getting off, she said. We're both getting off, together. She put her hand on top of mine, and I looked down at our two hands on the grass. Later that day, after we had filed back into class, Mrs. Douglas turned to us and clapped our signal. As everyone sat up in their seats and listened up, she turned to me. Mia, will you please come up to the front of the class, Mrs. Douglas asked. I glanced worriedly at Lupe as I got up and walked over. Now, class, you all remember the stories I asked you to write a while back about a small moment in your life? My heart jumped up to my throat. Mia here wrote about what it was like to come to America on an airplane, she said. Anyway, the other 5th grade teachers and I got together and we read everyone's stories and we all agreed that Mia's story. She paused for what felt like an eternity. I squeezed my eyes shut. We all agreed that Mia's story is absolutely wonderful. My jaw dropped. Mrs. Douglas handed me my story. Mia, would you please read your story to the rest of the class? I blinked at her, waiting for her to say, oh wait, there's been a mistake. Was this going to be like the chocolate notebook again? I told myself, do not feel that warm and fuzzy feeling. Not yet. But then I snuck a peek at my paper. There were red marks all over it, just like the last time, and lots of exclamation marks. But they didn't scream, bad grammar, in shouty caps. Instead, they said things like, moved me to tears, and, oh, Mia, this is incredible. Go on, she said. Read your story to the class. Right now? I asked. She nodded. With trembling hands, I took it from her, and I slowly began to read. As I read, my voice wavered. My throat was prickly, and my lips were dry. But still, I pushed forward in my tiny voice. When I finished reading, the whole room was silent. Everyone's eyes were on me. I stood so still. If a breeze swept through the classroom, I would have fallen. And then, amid the deafening silence, I heard a sound. The sound of clapping. I looked up to see Lupe clapping. A few kids joined her, and soon almost everyone in the room was clapping for me. Even Jason Yao. I felt my throat pinch with emotion. That was beautiful, Mrs. Douglas said. I looked up at the swelling pride in her face and instantly forgave her for giving away my sparkly pencil. Thank you, Mrs. Douglas, I said, and I started to go back to my seat. Wait, I have something for you. She reached inside her desk and pulled out a small piece of paper which she handed to me. I peered at the words, Pizza Hut, written on it. 2 free pizzas at Pizza Hut for you and a friend, she said. I looked up at Mrs. Douglas. I looked into her eyes. Are you sure? Has there been a mistake, I thought? When enough time passed and I was finally sure she wasn't going to take it away, I looked over at Lupe. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Chapter 60. Mom! I raced up the stairs 2 at a time. My parents were in the middle of cleaning room 22. My mother was holding Windex in one hand and Lysol in the other. Mom, Dad, guess what? I won a writing contest at school, I exclaimed. Are you serious? My mom asked. When did this happen? Today, I said, handing her my coupon to Pizza Hut. My dad beamed. He put the vacuum cleaner down, took me into his arms, and spun me around. What'd I tell you? You'd win some and you lose some, he exclaimed. I grinned. Lupe's coming over, I said to my mom. Will you take us to Pizza Hut? Will I ever, my mom said, tossing her Lysol and Windex to the side. I laughed. Ever since I could remember, my mom had been asking my dad to take her out to eat. Ever since I could remember, my mom had been asking my dad to take her out to eat. But of course, we could never afford it. And now we finally got to go. We didn't even need to carry a fake shopping bag. The pizza at Pizza Hut was bubbling hot. My mouth watered before I even tasted it, just from the smell wafting toward us from the kitchen. Lupe dug into hers, smiling as she devoured the cheese. "This is so good," Lupe said. I put a slice onto my mom's plate, and she took a bite and purred. It was almost enough, just watching the two of them. I was so happy. I looked around the room, thinking of all the times I'd walked by this place, peering through the windows, wondering what it was like to sit in one of the booths. "Mia, you gotta taste this," my mom pointed to my slice. I took a bite and felt the soft dough melt in my mouth. I'd had pizza before at school, but not like this. I closed my eyes, savoring every morsel of cheese and pepperoni. It was heavenly. My mother looked at me and said, "I'm so proud of you." "Not bad for a bicycle, right?" I said with a grin. I couldn't resist. My mom put the pizza down and turned to me. "You're not a bicycle," she said. "The truth is, I'm the bicycle." "Mom, you're not." "Yes, I am. You see how my English is. My English is terrible." I thought about the stupid woman who made fun of my mom's pronunciation. "So you say eggplant. Who cares?" My mom shook her head. "It's not that, it's everything." She looked down at the ground and then back at me. "Math, I could help you with, but Mia, I cannot help you with English." I finally understood why my mother had been saying all these things. She didn't want to hurt me. She wanted to help me. And she couldn't with English. That's why she was constantly pushing me to do math. I wanted to say to her, "Mom, have faith in me. I can do it on my own. I figured the front desk out on my own, didn't I?" "Don't worry, Mom," I said to her. "You don't have to always help me. I can do it." My mom didn't say anything for a long time. And then she smiled. "Clearly you can," she said. That afternoon, as we inhaled slice after slice after slice of deliciousness, my mom asked Lupe about her family back in Mexico. "Well, we left when I was very little, and I don't get to see them very often," Lupe said. "Well, why don't you guys go back and visit? I mean, since it's so close," I said. "I would go back every day if China were right there." Lupe shrugged. "Well, my mom says every time we go, we have to buy so many presents for everyone. I have 11 cousins, and that's just on my mom's side," Lupe said. "On my dad's sides, I have, let's see." Lupe counted on her fingers. 7, she announced. "You must miss them so much," my mom said, glancing at me. "Sometimes," she said, "but they all think that America is this super rich place where everyone just plays golf all day and drives around in a Cadillac." My mom laughed. "It's the same with my siblings," my mom said. "I think they get that from the movies." Lupe sighed. "I wish there was a movie that told them what it's really like," Lupe said. My mom shook her head. "No way. That would be so embarrassing." Lupe reached for another slice. "This is really nice, by the way," Lupe said, looking at me. "Thank you for inviting me." I smiled back at her. There was nobody in the world I'd rather share this with. Well, except... "Hey, should we save some for Dad?" I asked. I bet he'd never tasted anything like this before. Real pizza, not the frozen kind from the grocery store. Against our stomach's loud protests, I put my slice down, and so did my mother. She raised her hand to ask for a to-go box. Back at the motel, we found my dad in the kitchen making himself some rice with cabbage. "Forget the cabbage," my mom said with a smile as she handed him the pizza box. "Look what your daughter brought you." My dad huffed and puffed about how we didn't have to do that, but I could tell he was secretly glad that we did. As he bit into the pizza, he closed his eyes and groaned. Chapter 61. The kind people at Pizza Hut let me keep my coupon as a souvenir. Carefully, I taped it up next to the front desk so I could look at it every day while I worked. I wished I could tell my cousin Shen about it. The whole time Lupe was talking about her cousins in Mexico, I was thinking about Shen. There was this restaurant that Shen and I would always walk by on our way to school. It was a fancy Western restaurant, the only one in town, and naturally, it was way too expensive. Shen and I would talk about what it'd be like one day to go in there and order whatever we want. If Shen knew today that I'd gone to Pizza Hut, and for free too, he'd be so proud of me. I smiled at the thought. I pulled out a piece of paper and I started writing him a letter. If my mom didn't want to tell his mom anything about her, fine, but I just had to tell Shen. It had been a while since I last wrote. The last letter was before we started working for Mr. Yao. I wrote quickly, scribbling away about Lupe and Hank and Mr. Yao. I wrote about the car theft and the crazy security guard and freeing Uncle Zhang. I wrote about school and Jason, who wasn't quite so bad anymore, even though he still had my pencil. I told him about the essay contest and how I didn't win, but that Lupe and I were going to figure out another way to get off the roller coaster together. Finally, I told him about Mrs. Douglas and my writing, how I'd gone from 12 exclamation marks bad to 4 exclamation marks good. I even drew a picture of the Pizza Hut coupon so he could see for himself. In my neatest handwriting, I copied down all the words on the coupon, including the little expiration date at the bottom, so he could know exactly what it looked like. I was nearly done when the mailman came. "Oh, could you just wait a second?" I begged the mailman. "I want to mail this letter to my cousin in China, and I just need to get the address from my parents. It'll just take a second." "Did you say China?" he asked. He poked around in his big sack of letters and produced an envelope. "Looks like you just got something from there today." I peered at the letter in my hands. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the addressee. It was from Shen. "Thank you so much," I told the mailman. I was so excited. I forgot all about mailing my own letter to Shen and tore open his letter to me. The mailman chuckled as he left. It was a very long letter, 5 pages long to be exact. It was extremely detailed, and Shen even separated it into paragraphs. There was a paragraph on school, one on the neighborhood, and one on our family. Typical him, he was super organized. I raced through the letter, gulping it down as quickly as I could. I giggled at his description of his new teacher, Mr. Wang, and how he couldn't sneeze without farting at the same time. He told me all about the new kids at his school, many of whom were from the outskirts of the city. The entire neighborhood was changing all throughout the city. People were starting to buy up property, and the government was tearing down old brick buildings to make room for new high-rises. When I got to the section on family, though, my eyes did a double take. We recently moved to an apartment by the river because it's bigger. After you guys left, my dad was made head of department at his job. Long story short, the job came with a much bigger apartment. I no longer have to share with my parents. Now I have my own room. Oh, and we also got a car. It's nothing like the one you guys probably have in America, but it's pretty great. Last weekend we went to Beijing and walked around the Great Wall. We had a lunch at a brand new Peking duck restaurant. It was really fancy. Do they have Peking duck in America? Over and over, I read the words. New apartment, own room, car. I looked down at my own letter on the table, at my handwriting, which a minute ago looked neat and now looked puny. Slowly, I reread the words, how I'd gone on and on about the poor roller coaster and my pencil, how of my excitement of finally going to an American restaurant, and how my stomach growled when I made myself put the pizza back so I could save some for my dad. The more I read, the more my fingers stiffened. Suddenly, I didn't feel like sending my letter anymore. With my hands as heavy as rocks, I took my letter and Shen's letter and walked over to my closet. I stuffed them both, way in the back, together with my C- story and the rejection letter from the essay contest. Was it true? Was Shen rich now? The wild thought bounced around in my head as I tossed and turned. My lips formed around that word. Rich. It was like a passcode to a different galaxy. And now Shen was part of the galaxy and I wasn't. Could it be that while our life had gotten so hard, his life had gotten so much easier? The thought was so painful to bear I couldn't stand it. I rushed to lick my wounds. Shen may have his own room now, but I was pretty sure he still didn't have a bathroom with a shower, and he still had to go to the neighborhood bathhouse. His dad may have gotten a good job, but they'd never flown in an airplane and never stayed in a hotel before. With every never, I felt my panic subside. Later, when I could finally breathe again, guilt cut into me like the harsh fluorescent front office lights. How could I feel this way about my own cousin? He was family. If he was doing well, I should be happy for him. I should be proud of him. Because after all, if his family was rich now, didn't that mean... I sat up in bed. Mom! That's the end of chapter 61. So while you're writing about and responding to this chapter or working on your final project, I want you to kind of think about that relationship between Shen's family and Mia's family. Do you see a relationship between how they act with each other with any of the other relationships in the book? I know I see some parallels, some similarities between that. I think it's really interesting that they feel like they can't be honest with each other unless they're doing well. Like Shen wasn't sharing a lot about his life either until now. And I wonder if Mia will ever send that letter to him telling him the truth about what her life is like. I also want you to make a prediction. What is that idea she had, that bright idea that made her sit up in bed and yell for her mom? She said, if his family is rich now, that means ... And I wonder what she's going to do with that idea and that new information. Again, I've been loving seeing all your reading responses, and I'm really excited to see how your final projects are going. So let's chat tomorrow when we read the next few chapters. Bye, guys.